Rachel Whitmore didn't leave her husband because she stopped loving him. She left because the silence became unbearable. For 7 years, Rachel and Andrew Whitmore lived inside a marriage that looked finished, polished, complete. From the outside, it was the kind of life people admired without asking questions. 2 stable careers, a modest but beautiful home, matching smiles at family gatherings, photos that said everything is fine. But inside that house, there was a room no one entered, a future that never arrived, no child. At first, it didn't feel like a problem. Rachel remembered those early years clearly, how Andrew would squeeze her hand and say, "We've got time," how she believed him, how she imagined motherhood as something patient, something waiting politely in the distance, like a door they would open when they were ready. She wasn't anxious then. She wasn't afraid. She trusted time. But time doesn't wait quietly. It begins to speak. It speaks at birthdays, when candles are blown out and wishes go unspoken. It speaks at holidays, when chairs are added to tables, but never for you. It speaks at gatherings where friends arrive carrying babies wrapped in blankets, where congratulations are automatic and questions follow soon after. So when will it be your turn? At first, Rachel smiled and laughed it off. Andrew did too. But slowly something changed. Rachel began noticing how Andrew stiffened when the questions came, how his jaw tightened, how he suddenly needed another drink or found a reason to step outside. Rachel became careful with words, careful with hope, careful not to say too much. The absence grew heavier, not because it existed, but because it could no longer be ignored. Eventually, Rachel did what people do when they want answers instead of guesses. She suggested doctors. Together. Not urgently, not emotionally, just quietly one evening as they washed dishes side by side. Andrew didn't respond right away. Then he said it. "There's nothing wrong with me." His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't defensive. It was final. Rachel waited. She told herself patience was love. She adjusted her routines. She swallowed disappointment and convinced herself endurance was strength. She read quietly at night. She prayed without asking for miracles, only clarity. Andrew, meanwhile, began pulling away in smaller ways. Conversations shortened. Affection became conditional. Hope felt inconvenient. Rachel carried the weight alone, even though it was never hers to carry. Until one night, ordinary, quiet, almost forgettable, Andrew finally said the sentence that broke everything open. "I want a family," he said, standing in the doorway, not looking at her. "And I don't know if that's possible with you." He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He didn't insult her. He withdrew. And that was worse, because silence spoken aloud becomes truth, whether it's fair or not. Rachel understood then what Andrew had already decided. This wasn't about medicine. It wasn't about time. It wasn't even about children anymore. It was about blame. And in that moment, Rachel realized something devastating. She wasn't being loved through uncertainty. She was being quietly replaced by it. The argument that followed wasn't explosive. There were no slammed doors, no raised voices, just distance being formalized, love being measured against outcomes. Andrew framed it as logic, as practicality, as a future he could no longer wait for. Rachel begged, not desperately, not dramatically, but honestly, for answers, for truth, for time together instead of assumptions. Andrew refused, because answers might point back at him. And by morning, the marriage was over. Not because Rachel failed, but because silence had been allowed to decide for them.
Andrew Whitmore did not fall apart after the marriage ended. He advanced. While Rachel folded 7 years of her life into a suitcase, Andrew reorganized his future with surgical efficiency. There was no pause for reflection, no search for truth, no attempt to fix what he had broken. The silence that suffocated their marriage vanished the moment Rachel was gone. Not because the problem was solved, but because the problem was removed. Rachel waited for something, an apology, a question, even regret. It never came. Andrew didn't ask her to see a doctor together. He didn't wonder if he might be wrong. He didn't look back at the years she endured beside him and ask what she had carried alone. He simply moved on. And in doing so, he rewrote the story. Among friends and family, Andrew became the patient man who had tried everything, the husband who waited, the man forced to make a difficult but necessary decision. Rachel's name was never spoken with cruelty, but always with implication. It just didn't work. Some people aren't meant for motherhood. He deserved a family. Rachel absorbed it all in silence. She watched as Andrew replaced her life with alarming ease. A new woman appeared, not gradually, but suddenly, standing in the place Rachel once occupied, holding the future Rachel had been denied. Within 2 years, Andrew remarried. Then came the photos, the ones no one warned her about, the ones that said, "This is what success looks like now." And then came the announcement, a pregnancy. Rachel felt something inside her finally break, not from jealousy, but from understanding. The absence that haunted their marriage had never been investigated. It had simply been assigned to her. Andrew never wanted answers, because answers might have made him responsible. Rachel didn't rage. She didn't confront him. She did what she had always done. She endured. She rebuilt her life slowly, carefully, choosing peace over bitterness. She married again, not to prove anything, but because she still believed love could exist without conditions. Her new husband did not demand outcomes. He did not measure her worth against a future that hadn't arrived yet. But still, no child. And this time, Rachel did what Andrew never allowed. She sought the truth. The tests were clinical, unemotional, final. The doctor didn't hesitate. "You've likely never been able to conceive," he said. "I'm not sure how you missed this. This isn't new." The room felt suddenly too quiet. Rachel didn't cry right away. Instead, memory turned against itself. Every accusation Andrew never said out loud, every silence he used as evidence, every night she apologized for something she never caused. She had spent 7 years believing she was the barrier. Andrew had let her believe it, because it was easier. The truth didn't just expose a medical reality, it exposed a moral one. Andrew chose certainty over honesty, pride over partnership, escape over responsibility. He didn't leave because Rachel couldn't give him a child. He left because he refused to risk being the problem. Rachel sat with the results in her hands for a long time. She didn't feel rage. She felt clarity. And clarity is dangerous because it doesn't shout. It waits. When the invitation arrived, Andrew's name printed beside his new family, celebrating life, celebrating children, it felt almost insulting in its innocence. He had built a life on a lie, and now, without raising her voice, without demanding justice, Rachel was being invited to step back into the narrative he believed was finished. Andrew thought silence meant victory. He had no idea it had been gathering evidence.
The invitation did not arrive by accident. It arrived embossed, deliberate, and carefully timed, like everything Andrew Whitmore did when he wanted control. Thick paper, formal lettering, names placed with intention. Rachel Whitmore stared at it for a long time before opening it. Andrew Whitmore and family request the pleasure of your presence. Family. The word landed heavier than it should have. This wasn't a wedding. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a conversation. It was a display, a celebration of milestones, of children, of life continuing exactly the way Andrew had always insisted it would, without her. Rachel understood immediately what this was. Andrew wanted witnesses. He wanted her there to see what he had built, to confirm silently that leaving her had been the correct decision. He wanted the past seated neatly in a chair, watching the future move forward. He wanted proof. Rachel folded the invitation once, then unfolded it. The date, the location, a private gathering at Andrew's home. Familiar, intimate, calculated. She didn't feel anger. She felt tested. For years, silence had been used against her. Silence was how blame was assigned. Silence was how Andrew escaped accountability. And now, silence was what he expected again. Rachel didn't respond right away. She placed the invitation on the table beside the medical results she had folded neatly into an envelope weeks earlier. 2 pieces of paper, 2 truths, one public, one buried. For days, she let them sit there together. Rachel's husband noticed the invitation before she mentioned it. He didn't react immediately. He read it carefully, then looked at her, not with jealousy, not with suspicion, but concern. "You don't have to go," he said. Rachel nodded. "I know." But the decision had already begun forming. This wasn't about Andrew. It was about reclaiming authorship. Andrew had built a narrative where Rachel was the problem that had been solved. He had moved on with confidence because no one had ever challenged the story. And stories left unchallenged become history. Rachel had no intention of confronting him. She didn't plan a scene. She didn't rehearse words. She didn't prepare evidence. She planned to show up. That was all. In the days leading up to the gathering, Rachel noticed something strange. She wasn't nervous. She expected to be. She expected old shame to rise, old insecurity to return. But instead, there was a quiet steadiness, the kind that comes after grief has already done its damage. She chose what to wear carefully, not extravagantly, not modestly, intentionally. Not to impress, not to compete, to be accurate. Andrew, meanwhile, prepared obsessively. Guest lists were reviewed, seating was adjusted, children's photos were framed and positioned, conversations were rehearsed in his head before they ever happened. He told himself Rachel's presence didn't matter, but he checked anyway. "Did she respond?" he asked, pretending to mean someone else. When he was told yes, relief flickered across his face before he controlled it. Good. He wanted her there. What Andrew didn't understand was this. He expected Rachel to arrive smaller, grateful, regretful, quiet. He expected the past to behave. The day of the gathering arrived without drama. Rachel arrived early, not to make a statement, but because she didn't want to rush. She stood outside Andrew's home for a moment before entering, taking in the sounds of laughter inside, children running, voices overlapping. This was the life he said she prevented. She stepped inside. Conversation softened, heads turned, recognition traveled quickly. Some smiles were polite, some were curious, some were uncomfortable. Andrew saw her immediately. And in that instant, something went wrong. She wasn't what he remembered.
She wasn't tense, she wasn't apologetic, she wasn't avoiding eye contact. She stood calmly, posture relaxed, expression unreadable. Whole. Andrew smiled too late. Rachel smiled back, briefly, neutrally, and continued inside. She didn't hover near the walls, she didn't hide, she didn't insert herself into conversations. She existed, and that was enough to shift the room. Because the presence of someone who no longer seeks approval exposes the lie in everyone who still does. Andrew felt it immediately. The narrative was slipping, and the gathering had only just begun.
The house was too full. Too many voices layered over one another. Too much laughter echoing down hallways that were never meant to carry this kind of noise. The air smelled like food, perfume, and something sharper, nervousness disguised as celebration. Children ran through the rooms laughing freely, unaware they were part of the display. Their drawings were taped carefully to the walls. Their photos were framed and placed at eye level. Andrew had curated this evening with intention. This was proof. Rachel felt it the moment she stepped inside. This wasn't a gathering, it was an exhibit. She moved slowly through the house, every step deliberate. Guests noticed her in stages, first confusion, then recognition, then discomfort. Conversations thinned as she passed, smiles tightened. Some people looked away too quickly, as if eye contact itself might invite a reckoning. Andrew watched her constantly, not openly, not obviously, but his eyes tracked her the way people track danger they don't want to acknowledge. She didn't behave the way he needed her to. She didn't shrink. She didn't hover near exits. She didn't look like a woman who had lost something. She looked settled. That terrified him. He laughed louder than necessary, interrupting conversations that didn't include him. He retold stories about fatherhood, exaggerating warmth, emphasizing gratitude, each word aimed not at his guests, but at Rachel. "See, this is what you couldn't give me." Rachel listened without blinking. That silence, measured, unreactive, pressed on Andrew's chest like weight. He had expected emotion, resistance, even bitterness. Instead, she offered nothing. People approached her cautiously, as if speaking to her required the right tone. "How are you?" someone asked softly. Rachel answered calmly, "I'm well." The simplicity unsettled them. No qualifiers, no sadness, no explanation. Andrew's wife joined them briefly, one hand resting protectively on a child's back. She smiled with the ease of someone who believed the ground beneath her was stable. "I'm glad you came," she said. Rachel nodded. "Thank you for inviting me." Their eyes met. There was no hostility there, only truth. Andrew felt something tighten sharply in his throat. This wasn't going how he imagined. The room seemed to close in as the evening wore on. Conversations looped back to children again and again, birth stories, school plans, laughter that landed too hard. Rachel remained still through it all. Then someone asked the question, not cruelly, not intentionally. "So, Rachel," a relative said, smiling politely, "do you and your husband have kids yet?" The room didn't stop. It held its breath. Andrew felt heat rush to his face. His wife shifted beside him. Someone coughed. Another guest suddenly found their drink fascinating. Rachel didn't rush her answer. "No, we don't," she said gently. Silence followed. "Oh, well, there's always time," the woman replied, quickly. Andrew nodded too fast, too eagerly. Rachel smiled. She didn't correct her. She didn't need to, because the truth was already present, heavy and unseen, pressing against the walls.
Andrew tried to recover, changed the subject, raised his voice, pulled attention back toward himself, but the energy had changed. The guests felt it. They spoke more carefully now. Their laughter thinned. Their glances lingered too long. Andrew realized something horrifying. Rachel wasn't attacking him. She wasn't accusing him. She was letting him drown in the version of himself he built. He approached her finally, voice low, controlled. "I hope this isn't uncomfortable for you," he said. Rachel looked at him, not with anger, not with nostalgia, with clarity. "It's revealing," she said. Andrew forced a laugh. "Good," but his hands were shaking. The walls felt closer now. The noise felt louder. The children's laughter, once reassuring, felt accusatory. This gathering had stopped being a celebration. It had become containment. And Andrew understood far too late that this night was no longer about proving he was right. It was about whether the truth would survive the room. And the truth had already taken its seat.
The reckoning did not arrive with shouting. It arrived with paperwork. Rachel found out the truth on an ordinary afternoon, the kind that doesn't announce itself as important. The clinic smelled like disinfectant and patience. The walls were beige, the chairs uncomfortable. The nurse's voice calm in a way that suggested she had delivered both miracles and grief in the same hour. Rachel sat alone. Andrew wasn't there. He never liked hospitals. When the doctor returned, he didn't smile. He didn't frown either. He sat down and spoke carefully, as if each word had weight. "Rachel," he said, "your results are conclusive." She nodded. Her hands were steady, too steady. "There is a congenital condition. You would not have been able to conceive naturally. It's not stress-related, it's not timing, it's not something you caused." Rachel stared at him. The words rearranged her entire past. 7 years of silence. 7 years of blame she accepted quietly. 7 years of watching a man she loved grow colder while she grew smaller. "I was never," her voice caught, "I was never going to get pregnant?" The doctor shook his head gently. No. There it was, the truth Andrew never wanted to test. Rachel didn't cry, not then. She thanked the doctor, collected her papers, walked out into the sun like nothing had changed, but everything had. She didn't tell Andrew immediately. She didn't call. She didn't confront. She let the truth sit inside her like a held breath, because for the first time she understood something terrifying and liberating all at once. Andrew hadn't left because of uncertainty. He left because he didn't want answers that might implicate him. And now the truth belonged to her. Days later, Rachel hosted the dinner. Not large, not dramatic, just family, familiar faces, familiar assumptions. Andrew arrived confident, too confident. His children ran ahead of him into the house. His wife smiled politely. He looked comfortable in a life he believed he had earned by being honest. Rachel watched him from across the room and waited. Dinner progressed. Small talk, laughter, clinking glasses. Then Rachel stood. "I'd like to say something," she said calmly. The room quieted. Andrew's smile froze. Not fully, just enough. "This isn't a speech," she continued. "It's clarification." Andrew's wife turned slightly, confused. Rachel didn't look at her. She looked at Andrew. "For years," Rachel said, "I believed I was the reason my marriage ended. I accepted that belief without proof. I carried it silently." Andrew shifted in his seat. "This week," Rachel said, lifting the folder in her hand, "I learned the truth." Andrew's breath caught. She opened the folder slowly. "I cannot conceive," she said plainly. "I never could." Gasps rippled through the room. Andrew's wife turned sharply toward Andrew. Rachel continued. I asked Andrew to get tested, repeatedly. He refused. Andrew stood halfway. Rachel, she raised a hand. Don't, she said softly. This is the first time you don't get to control the narrative. She turned to the table. He left me not because he knew the truth, but because he didn't want to risk discovering it. Silence crushed the room. Rachel faced Andrew again. You didn't leave a broken woman. You abandoned one to protect your pride. Andrew's wife stood. What is she talking about? She demanded. Andrew couldn't answer, because truth does not need defense. Rachel closed the folder. I invited you here because I wanted witnesses, she said calmly, not to punish you, but to free myself. She looked around the table. I carried shame that never belonged to me, and tonight I'm putting it down. Andrew's children watched silently. His wife stepped back from him. Andrew's mouth opened. No words came out. For the first time in his life, silence didn't protect him. It exposed him. Rachel picked up her glass. To truth, she said quietly. She drank. Andrew's marriage did not end that night, but it cracked, and cracks let light in, or tear everything apart. Rachel slept peacefully for the first time in years. Andrew did not sleep at all. Because the reckoning was never about revenge. It was about what happens when silence stops obeying fear, and the truth finally speaks without permission.